I told you I was going to do that. Right, guys, thanks ever so much for turning up. But to everybody else for having taken the time to attend this webinar for the next 30 minutes or so, good afternoon. I'm Detective Inspector Ross Brown, and I'm Head of Cyber and Innovation for the Southwest Cyber Resilience Centre. As I said, I'd like to welcome you all to the panel discussion, which is in collaboration with some of our trusted partners, who I would like to introduce to you. But before I do so, I'd just say a huge thank you to the three of you for giving your time and sharing your expertise with us all this afternoon. So in no particular order then, Ben from Blue Screen IT based in Plymouth. Welcome, Ben.
Hi.
Pete from Securus IT Solutions based in Exeter. Welcome to you.
Hi there, you're right.
And lastly, but certainly not least, Jim from C3IA Solutions based here in sunny Paul in Dorset. So welcome to you all. For everybody else, you can find links to the speakers' respective companies through our website. As I'm sure you can see behind me, it's www.swcrc.co.uk. And don't forget to join us as a free call member if you haven't already done so, as we can provide you with free products and guidance, as well as regular updates on how to keep your business safer online. Just one final point before we start. The questions being discussed this afternoon have already been submitted by our members. If you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to submit them on the chat feed. And if we get time before we finish at 2:30 this afternoon, we'll answer them on air. If not, I'll put the answers out on our August newsletter. Right, game show host voice on now. Without further ado, Pete, if we can go to you first, can I ask you, what are the most frequent cyber incidents that you've had to respond to, and could they have been prevented?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think really for us, being on the coalface, if you like, we've seen a lot of these cyber incidents, as you put them, out there. I think for us, it's ransomware is the key thing. We've seen a lot of ransomware attacks, and that takes a form of malicious software being installed on users' computers and machines, generally via malicious links, so accidentally clicking on a link that opens you up to the installation of potential malware. We see a lot of credit card breaches as well with users' websites and e-commerce platforms, etc. I think for us, could they have been prevented? Well, obviously we're all about putting systems and things in place to actually prevent these things happening. And I think without thinking too technical, I think we need to all take a step back and look at some of the basics and look at some of the staff awareness training, for example, will be the key thing. Yeah, the people are the human factor is key in all of this. User access control as well, that would be another key element in terms of giving your staff least privileges to do the work they need to do, and keeping the sort of that level of privilege within the function of the business. So, you know, the bad guys that just want to get in straight in at administration level and start manipulating systems. So keeping that access levels down to a standard user level will be really key. But yeah, to answer the particular question, yeah, ransomware is really high up there.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Ben, if we can turn to you, please. Can I ask you what processes, stroke security, would you have to have in place to get cyber insurance and for it to pay out if there was an attack?
Yeah, great question. I think something very prevalent with everything that's going on now is, you know, as Pete just mentioned, ransomware is a huge risk at the moment. So more and more organizations are looking towards cyber insurance to mitigate and to reduce some of that risk. And I think one of the things before we talk about what you need is to remember that just because cyber insurance is there, you still own that risk. You can't transfer all of that risk to someone else. You know, the financial piece we can, but the actual risk still belongs to us as an organization. So I think it's something to be certainly mindful of. With regards to cyber insurance, you know, every insurance company's got different types of policies now. However, we're seeing more and more are basically saying that you have to do certain things now. There's certain stuff that you've got to do as an organization before, you know, your cyber insurance is going to pay out. So things like data backup policies, you need to make sure you have some kind of data backup. If you're doing a lot of financial approvals, so maybe you're doing within the email side where you're getting the financial team to sign certain amounts of funds off. We've all seen that now within this kind of business email compromise. You need to have a policy in place, so ensuring that you've got a duplicate sign off, or you're getting external authorization from someone else within the team before you transfer funds to someone else. So there's a big piece around organizations having that now. Obviously, antivirus is a huge one, and you got to make sure it's updated. And I know a couple of the questions we'll talk about is about updating and patching and pieces like that. But lots of us have got antivirus, but we don't know if it's been updated, if it's still valid. And that's really important as the threats change and shift, and certainly from a ransomware perspective. And we've got to talk about ransomware cover now, because you will need to look at the small print in a lot of your insurance policies. There's a big report put out, certainly from Hiscox, that some insurance policies are now removing the ransomware cover out because, as Pete's mentioned, it's so prevalent. It's such a big thing, and organizations aren't doing anything. They're just transferring all that risk to the insurance company. So ensuring you still got ransomware cover, I think, is a big key one to look at. And hey, we're going to talk about Cyber Essentials probably on this webinar, and what a great way to talk about Cyber Essentials is when you're looking at cyber insurance. One of the great things that comes with Cyber Essentials is you get free insurance included in your policy up to certain limitations. So if you haven't got in cyber insurance, make sure those things are covered. If you don't and you're looking, obviously make sure, or if you're trying to get Cyber Essentials, just be aware that cyber insurance policies are covered and included within that application as well.
Brilliant, thanks Ben. Good advice, and nice transition to Cyber Essentials as well. Jim, if I can come to you, please, next. A question here, the question is, doesn't understand the difference between patches and updates. How would you help them to sort of distinguish between the two?
Yeah, it leads on nicely from what Ben was just saying, really. And what I'd say, first of all, is this is one of the most challenging areas across public and private sectors to get this right. It's really difficult, but actually it's the one thing that makes the most difference. And if you look at a lot of attacks and how things are compromised, most of the time, but not all, but most of the time, it's because they weren't running the latest software or they haven't got a security patch applied. So let's use the analogy of a car in terms of an update. So on my car, I want new tyres to make it go better or run faster. So that's an update to the car. If I want to fix a dent and paint a corner of the car, I apply a little patch of paintwork. So in IT terms, think Microsoft Windows, an update is moving from Windows 7 to Windows 10, the current latest version. And within those versions, there's individual releases as well. So you get Windows 10.1 and so on and so on. A patch, as I've said, thinking of the car, fixes a scratch or a dent. So some of the software that's released, unfortunately, isn't written properly, it has bugs in it, and those things need to be fixed. And so vendors and suppliers will give you a patch to fix something that's usually wrong or defect with the product. Wouldn't it be great if they released all software 100% working, and life would be, absolutely easy. Now, in terms of what you need to do as users, really just set your computer systems and your antivirus to auto update where you can. That is the simplest thing to do. Microsoft Windows will take care of itself. Don't defer the updates because you're busy, allow them to run. Across an enterprise or a bigger business, it's a little bit more challenging, but the fundamentals are the same. If you've got specialist products, specialist hardware and software, you do need to plan and schedule those in, usually out of hours. But again, the fundamentals are the same. Update the system, keep it up to date. Most cloud-based services today will take care of that for you as part of that cloud service. And the last point, and Ben touched on it, if you're using third-party suppliers, check the small print in your commercial agreements in terms of what they do for you in terms of updating and patching the software and the services that they're providing. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. No, that was great. Thank you very much indeed. Pete, if we can come back to you, please. What are the basics we can do as a small business owner to help make our businesses more cyber secure?
Yeah, so Jim's already touched on and Ben as well around Cyber Essentials. So that's a really good starting point. It covers 5 controls and the basic controls really that can protect you from a good 80% of the actual threats out there, the internet-borne threats out there. But key to us really, and key to any small business or any business in fact, is and I keep going on. It sounds like a record playing, but it is really around staff awareness training. If your staff don't know what a malicious email looks like, or if they're reacting to emails from your suppliers with bank account details to be changed, etc., those sort of things, you've got to be, give them awareness of what some of the scams could look like, and it's just some really relevant security awareness training for the people on the ground. Really, just keep them informed of the latest threats. Certainly to the market that you're operating in as well. There's some specific, there's education market. There's all sorts of different verticals that have different types of threats, and they're common throughout. So it's understanding what the risk is to your environment, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're a supplier, whatever. It's key to understand that. And then also user access as well. Just keeping the permissions to the least privileged to actually function as a role. And we see it quite often where people move within the organisation, so they might have been helping out with payroll, so they had access to financial information and accounts, etc. They move into potentially an operational role, but those permissions have carried on with them. So that all of a sudden, 2-3 years into a business, they've got access to a lot of privileged information which they don't necessarily need to do their job. So that would be another key thing. We've mentioned patching and security, patching on operating systems and software throughout. So that's another key thing. And also remember passwords as well. That, let's all implement really strong passwords. And there's a lot of, you need to remember a lot of passwords, because obviously it's not best practice to use the same password throughout all platforms. So, but there are some really good password safes and password managers that are really useful for this operation. But those would be really the easiest things to do, and at no cost really. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Thanks, Pete. And don't ever apologise about just reaffirming things, because I think we all probably know that actually there are only about 6 or 7 things that we need to be doing. And it's just a question of just reinforcing that constantly. Just one quick aside, if I may. Pete, what are your thoughts about using web browsers to store passwords? Is that secure enough?
Well, it depends on the environment. Obviously, if you're in a public space, or if you're in a shared machine environment, I wouldn't necessarily endorse that. But a lot of our advice comes, as it comes from the National Cyber Security Centre, and they're recommending strong passwords is actually safe to store in browsers. So you just got to be mindful of the environment you're operating in. I think if you've got shared access on your machine, or the potential of losing that mobile device or mobile laptop, etc., then you just got to bear a bit of common sense to it as well. Is it really that much of a hassle to implement enter 2-factor authentication into a website every time you go onto it? I mean, yes, it's an inconvenience, but it could be the savior of your business by doing that. So just got to weigh up that. It's all about risk. It's all about what's risk is acceptable to you as an organisation.
No, that's great. Thanks, Pete. Ben, if we can move back to you, please. How often do you have to update your system, or is it done automatically by Microsoft?
So I could talk forever, but it's just one word I need to use, and that's constantly. There's no other word that you need to think about other than the word constantly. We talk about patching and we talk about updates, as Jim mentioned there. The big key area is now the shared responsibility model. As more organizations have taken their business estates off premise, so that kind of within your own area, and you've moved it into that cloud environment, whether that be Microsoft Azure or Google's cloud or Amazon's AWS, be very mindful. And it goes back to that third-party supplier agreements to ensure that you're doing your updates and patching and they're constantly being done, or the provider is doing it. Because you don't want to be in this terrible situation where you have this assumption that they're doing it and they're assuming that you're doing it, and before you know it, all your data is available to kind of every man and his dog within the world. So the answer there is constantly. However, we talk about automatic updates. highly recommend it, the best way to go. But we also need to make sure they've been applied. So you need to check they've been applied. I work in organizations, and you'll visit them on site to give them some advice about updates, and the box will pop up and it will say that these updates need to be installed at this hour, and you click snooze. And then a week later, it'll pop up and you'll click snooze. And before you know it, that kind of 14-day window that we talk about in Cyber Essentials as the maximum time permitted to really install updates. And the reason for that is because of the time it takes the bad people in the world to kind of work out what that patch is doing and then bring it into a kind of into your environment. It's to make sure that we're not snoozing those updates over that 14-day period, because even though we're applying our patches constantly, even though we've got that shared responsibility, we know who's involved and who should be doing it, the patches aren't actually being applied to our organization's infrastructure. So it's really important to make sure that they are actually being applied. So to answer that, constantly, but make sure it's being done.
Brilliant. Good advice. Thanks, Ben. Jim, question for you, if I may. How can I make sure that my staff don't get caught out with phishing emails? Is there a way of recognizing them?
So this is really difficult. It's difficult for security professionals to recognize now. And so the answer is yes, there can be some ways, and I'll go through some sort of general rules and awareness. There are technical solutions, first of all, that can be put in place that filter emails. If you're using third-party suppliers, you can establish controls with them to do filtering of emails before they even touch your organization. Outlook does this reasonably well if it's configured. So general rules. Okay, first of all, be careful what you give away for free. We put stuff on social media, Facebook, our dogs, our date of births, etc. They become our passwords, don't they? Because that's what we do, because we can remember them. So think about what you're giving away for free. And also on your own company websites, we do want to tell potential clients and customers what we're doing, but do we really need to tell them who the head of HR or finance is? Because they become targets for people who are doing phishing, okay? Because they hold really valuable information that criminals want. Secondly, when you get an email, we're all busy and we don't stop and think. We click the link or we click send and it's too late. So all the education advice we use, we call it the 5-second rule. Try and give yourself 5 seconds. When you read that email, if needs be, read it again, because generally you'll get a gut feeling there's something not quite right. And you understand your business better than anyone as to what that is asking of you, whether you should be doing it. So just stop and check. Sometimes spelling and grammar can be a little bit off, but they're really good at it nowadays. So that's few and far between, the criminals. What you can do, you can hover your mouse over the from email address, and it will then highlight what the actual email address is. So where it might say something like from amazonorders.co.uk or at Amazon, if you put your mouse over that, that then becomes usually a load of gobbledygook of letters and characters that would make no sense to you, and therefore you wouldn't do anything because you wouldn't recognize it. Additionally, conduct regular training and awareness campaigns in your organization. If you have the ability, try and send in fake emails to test people without them knowing. Hand in hand with that goes not punishing people if they make a mistake. Absolutely fundamental, okay? If experts can get caught out, as I've said, it's very difficult for normal users in your company. So if they make a mistake, don't punish them, because if there's fear of reprisal, they're less likely to report, okay? And we want to know when an incident has occurred. Lastly, have an incident plan. So things generally will go wrong at some point, but know what to do, know who to contact, know who to report to. If this includes personal data, that might also include the Information Commissioner's Office. And for really good advice and guidance, if you go to the NCSC's website and type in phishing, it will come up with a whole range of really clear, practical guidance that you can do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jim. No, really useful. Thank you very much indeed. Pete, if we can come back to you, and perhaps we'll just do the next couple of questions, because I know they relate to e-commerce, which I know is a particular interest of yours. As a small e-commerce business, what cyber attacks can I be at risk from? I guess I don't know the full impact of what can happen during an attack, and I always just think of our website. but I guess anything online can be hacked: emails, company files, password manager, etc.
Yeah, sure. And I think, yeah, more generally, everything online has a footprint that can be attacked. And I think for us, seeing a lot of e-commerce, or having a lot of e-commerce clients, and we had, I think 2019, 2020, we had double figures of e-commerce sites that were breached. And essentially what they're after generally with an e-commerce site is obviously card data. So that can be resold on the dark web and generate income, but also it generates a source of income for the threat actors in terms of using those card details maliciously elsewhere. So it's a good source of income for these guys, and also a big cause of distress for the actual e-commerce site owners. And we've seen small businesses go out of business basically based on the fines that come down from the card ban. So it is a serious problem. It's also linked to the fact that almost what Ben was saying about the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. A lot of small businesses especially go into, they don't have the funds and resource to actually develop their own e-commerce platform, and it can be quite costly to do that. So they'll use a third party, which is a trusted party. You don't really know a lot about them, but they claim that they're good at e-commerce and they can provide all this platform for you. And I think key to me in that area is just doing your due diligence and making sure that you look for some accreditation from them. You make sure that they're talking the talk, and you get a bit more information about who's actually ultimately hosting your website. Payment facilitators and payment processors, they normally bolt into your platform. So you'd normally have a management page where you can integrate any sort of payment platform, whether that's SagePay, Stripe, whatever. And that's normally quite straightforward and it doesn't need a lot of skill to do that. But what's really paramount to some of the breaches we've seen is some of the websites might have been in development, so they've had some really easy username password set up, and that's actually transferred into a live environment, so a really easy break in there. Access controls aren't in place, so you've got a marketing team with full admin access, putting all these different plugins. The typical one we saw year before last was a plugin that's going to tell marketing how many hits they're getting on the site. That was a malicious plugin, and it started skimming card data. So there's all sorts of things that you can do to prevent these things happening. I guess it's a myriad of things that could happen to a website, but key to me is understanding the hosting company, the third party that's providing that service if you're not doing it yourself, doing a really good set of due diligence on them, and understand that don't try and take payments yourself and develop systems. Always use your third-party payment providers. That's their business. That's what they do. They integrate with all sorts of platforms, Drupal, WordPress, all that sort of stuff. And one thing I will mention as well is when it all goes wrong, obviously, Jim's literally just touched on it, but absolutely have a breach response plan. What if card data gets lost or stolen or breached? What if, we lose access to the website? Who do we contact? How do we have a marketing plan to tell our clients, etc. And also have that disaster recovery process in place as well. How do we get back on our feet? How do we spin up an alternative site? How do we recover from this and get back on our feet? And but that's just an e-commerce platform. That it happens to emails. It happens to your corporate website. You can get defacement on that. You can, if you've got customer portal logins and things, these are all open to the internet and open to breaches. So it's
Great, thanks, Pete. You must be clairvoyant because you've actually answered the supplementary question as well, so congratulations.
Fair enough.
Ben, if I can come back to you, what sort of details would I hold as a small business that a hacker would be interested in stealing?
Crikey, anything. Within the cyber world, we kind of talk about this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and it's a terrible thing to say, but you really need to be aware of it. So small business, medium business, large business, it doesn't really make any difference now. They are after names, addresses, bank account information, personal identifiable information. Maybe you work in, you have intellectual property, or you're creating products and services, and your blueprints and your drawings are on there. So you've got no personal data, but from a business perspective, if that was kind of released through ransomware into the wild, potential loss of revenue. And certainly from a supply chain now, and supply chain attacks are massive, and we see them more and more. The smaller businesses, they're at the end of the supply chains, and they make certain components. But what you'll find is, as a hacker now, if I break into 10 of those really small supply chain businesses, the small businesses, I can start to piece the jigsaw puzzle together, and actually I can then create and make whatever the original product was at the beginning of the supply chain. And the reason that businesses, and unfortunately small businesses, are attacked, it's normally to do with the experience within the organization. The smaller supply chains, the smaller businesses, as we're talking about there, they don't have the skill level, they don't have the expertise and that knowledge within information security. And, it might not be their core business and they're not looking at it. We could put like figures and facts, and, I've got some stats there, kind of Symantec, 36% of attacks now are against small businesses, because they're classed as what's called low-hanging fruit. They don't have those requirements. They don't have the skill set. It's not on their mind to do this, and they don't understand then the business data that they got and how it could be used. And then when we're talking about data, and it's a great lead on from what Pete mentioned there, it's all about data. Data is the new gold. Everything is now sold. It's on the dark web yesterday, so it's £6.50 for credit card information now. So it's big. It's supply and demand. They're driving down the price of credit card information, which means the attackers need more of it to kind of bundle it all together to try and generate more revenue and make it worthwhile. So the answer to that is anything. Any data that you have might not necessarily be personal to someone, but to a business, it can be anything.
No, I think that's a vitally important message, and one that I'm sure that we all try and get out constantly, is it doesn't matter what line of sector of business you're in, how big your business is, you've got data online, somebody's interested in it, aren't they? Right, I think we've got time for just one more, Jim, if you don't mind. There are a number of different ways to construct a password. Some people say 3 random words, some websites stipulate using a certain number of characters with numbers, including upper and lower case. We will find it really confusing. Have you got any sort of concise advice to help our members?
So it is confusing. Having a password's good. That's the first thing. And then we really want to try and make it difficult for an attacker to understand or crack. So I worked out the other day, I have about 30 accounts in work alone. That's not my private life. So what chance do we have of trying to remember all those passwords and credentials? It's impossible. So you need a strategy. You need to come up with a way of being able to access the passwords. One of the questions was about web browsers, and web browsers can store passwords, and we've touched on that a little bit, and that's good, and it's recommended if you're the sole user of that account or that device. But what can we do? So firstly, if you have access to a password manager, recommendation is to use it. I can quote loads, LastPass, and so on and so on, okay? There's free ones, there's paid for ones. LastPass is reasonably good as a free password manager. It's about £3 a month if you want to pay for it, or thereabouts. And that stores all your passwords in a single place. You can get it to give you strong or complex passwords, and then you only need to remember one. So that's the first thing, if you have the ability to use a password manager. Secondly, 3 random words. Yes, that's good, but we tend to forget anything that's random. So rather than random words, make something that's unique to you. I personally use an album or a favorite song, all right? But something that's at least 9 characters long. And that passphrase, you never tell anyone, you keep it in your head, you don't write it down. And then what I do, I stick a capital letter at the beginning, and I stick some random numbers and complex characters, question marks and exclamation marks at the end. And it's that bit at the end that I write down somewhere. And that doesn't matter, because if that goes in my phone in a secure folder, or someone gets my phone, or they get my book with it written down, they haven't got that passphrase, because that's in my head. So nothing's compromised. I then try and change that passphrase every year, or in the event of anything being compromised wider across IT systems. A couple of final points. Don't forget privileged account users and administrators. Absolutely key to protecting your systems, because attackers will always go after them first, because they hold keys to the kingdom. And we've talked a little bit about two-factor authentication, or multi-factor authentication, you might see it referred to as. Where this is offered, use it, okay? If you use online banking or online shopping, Amazon or whatever, you can set this up. It's really easy. They will send you a code or something to your mobile phone or to an email address. And should an attacker get your password, they can't access your an account unless they've got that second piece of information, okay? Hence the term two-factor authentication. And again, good guidance at the NCSC's website under passwords collection.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jim. Absolutely brilliant. And I think we're smack on for time as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to give us the benefit of your considerable advice this afternoon. I'm really, really grateful. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope the audience enjoyed it. Like I say, if you've got any questions, if you want to pop them into the chat forum, or if not, get hold of us either through our website and indeed through any of the other companies, C3IA, Bluescreen, and Securius. So thank you very much indeed, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think, like we said, I think we did well to get that in half an hour. So a lot of information, but a lot of common sense stuff that we need to apply. So yeah, thank you.
Fantastic.